We always knew this was going to happen. This one is for all the marbles.
You have your story straight?
Yeah, This is my first interrogation, you know? I'm, like, legit nervous.
Advertising is a very small world, and when you do something like malign the reputation of a girl from the steno pool on her first day, you make it even smaller.
Sweet.
Yay.
Welcome, everyone, to an all-new episode of TV Dinners. I'm your host, Jen. I'm here joined also with Tori and Betty. Tonight we are going to talk about something that I have to start the podcast by saying nothing that I say tonight should lead you to believe that I don't love the series that we are going to talk about, because I do. I absolutely love them. We're going to talk about something that is more of a label right now in television, and why, at least from my perspective, I think it is so almost defective in terms of being a good both advocate for getting people to watch more TV, and also why the descriptor itself really doesn't seem to create for anyone anything in particular other than perhaps the writers. I just want to, there's so many things that I want to talk about with this. But the first thing that I want to say is almost everything that is labeled prestige TV is amazing TV. There's very little that has been released over the past 10 or so years that is labeled prestige TV that isn't sort of the best of the best. There are things that specifically come to mind with Emmy nominations, but then there's also the background stuff. There are fantastic cinematography pieces. There's phenomenal storytelling, and I do mean really phenomenal storytelling. Excellent character arcs, really essential characters themselves that have become iconic in our everyday life, and we use them even as now descriptions of everyday things that we do. All this though all this though kind of pales in comparison to how we are treating television that is of a higher quality, and why I feel like we are differentiating it and how it is contributing to a kind of division within our both, well, within the general population and how we view TV altogether. So we have a lot of prestige TV that ends up on streaming channels. HBO was kind of the first real breakout to continually pump great series that I think now we can all say were prestige TV at the time. But then we have channels like AMC. We have channels like FX, people that really took risks on some of their content. Now, what has happened though is there's this huge division between the people that watch prestige TV and the people who go, maybe that's not really for me. This is a little bit too highbrow. There's so much elitism in storytelling right now, and people don't say it that way. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. They say things like, I don't like what I see on TV now because it feels woke. I don't like what I see on TV right now because it is telling me to do things or to feel things or remember things or experience things that I don't think are right or I don't like, or and this is a huge problem
Blah,
because
blah, blah.
storytelling by itself is not always directed by what is happening to us currently in our own cultural stance. And one of the things that really has struck for me this conversation being important is I got Apple TV to see Jason Momoa in C. and I watched the first season, and this is in no way to say that C is not a good series, because I believe in some ways it actually is a good series. There are a lot of really excellent and masterful uses of storytelling here. But it is the kind of storytelling that is, who asked for that? What person was sitting at home going, hey, I know what would be good. A bunch of blind people in a post-apocalyptic world who then have children that can see, and those are going to it nothing in this world makes sense. And so it's good storytelling, but it just doesn't make any sense. And I kept comparing C to all of the other shows that I then thought about as prestige TV, and some of them lived up to, I think, the sort of highbrow, this is really elite television. And then some things were just ridiculous, bad, just bad. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of them tonight and see if we can come to a consensus about whether the term, the label, prestige TV makes sense anymore. And then sort of explore a little bit what actually makes what I would call television for the thinking person, and then how that differentiates from some other kinds of storytelling. So first, let me introduce my awesome co-hosts. Tori, how are you?
I am great. I am great. This is going to be a fun topic.
I
Yeah.
think so too.
Yeah.
I think there will be a lot of. I have tons of questions for you guys, tons and tons.
Great.
And
I love
Betty,
it.
how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome.
And how are you?
I'm good. I can't seem to figure out why I have this tickle in my throat. So if I clear my throat, I'm so sorry, but that's just the way that it is.
Whoops.
We saw earlier that Betty is in her cabin in the woods. So we were making jokes about the fact that, watch out for the Deadites.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, was funny apparently to everyone except Betty. So,
Uh,
okay. So the very first question that I'm going to ask you guys is, have you ever seen a TV show that you thought was created in a way that just felt like it was too, and I'm going to use this term, you can use any term that you want to, but highbrow, that it was like made for elite, that it was made to be elitist, that it was made to be for people that were perhaps I don't know, like almost like the show itself was condescending. What about, I'll start with you, Betty. Tell me.
I don't know. I don't know. I have to think about that.
Okay. Have you,
That's a
Tori?
difficult question.
yeah, that's a very difficult question to start out.
Okay, this sort of gets to the heart, though, of why I think the idea of prestige TV is actually very nonsensical. Because no one in their right minds wants to believe that a show, especially a series, is somehow, I won't say above them, but is like that like you wouldn't get it, right? Everybody that I know, at least, wants to believe on some level that they understand what is being handed to them.
You know
right?
what? On a certain level, I think that there's a certain kind of snobbery that comes to Gilmore Girls.
Yes.
With the amount of it's literally known that you cannot get every reference in a single episode, and they like go out of their way to like name all of these things that you wouldn't know everything of to make you, I guess, feel not as cool as they are.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a pretty good example of how that gets done. I watched quite some time ago, or I went back and watched quite some time ago, Mad Men, and I know I actually gave that to Betty to talk about tonight.
I love it.
And I was struck on a number of occasions by the amount of purposeful condescension that Mad Men has toward society, today by calling out the things that were incredibly misogynistic and racist and just oddly out of place, even now, even, you know, what, 70, 30, 50 years later, we are still dealing with these almost the exact same issues, except we are dealing with them in sort of different capacities. But the show itself really does make me feel that way. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're going to condescend to me, do it with a purpose. Do it to make me feel something out of it. The other one that
I
go
think the
ahead.
characters are condescending.
Yeah.
Therefore, it makes sense for them to be condescending towards the audience.
The tone of Mad Men can be very
Right.
condescending.
Yeah.
But I think like Don is very condescending to everyone, basically.
Yes.
So, I mean, it makes sense that we would feel as if he was doing the same thing to us. At the same time, I think basically every character in the show is flawed except for the children, because they're children. So, I think that one of the best parts about the show is you don't necessarily like everyone either.
So there's a little bit of there's a twinge, I guess, of what makes a show what we call it when we call it prestige TV. What makes a show feel like it is truly talking down to us, or not even talking down to us sometimes. Hannibal is another great example. We are not at Hannibal's level, and we're not supposed to be, right? We are supposed to understand that Hannibal is so far in his own league that it takes someone who is so neurodivergent like Will Graham to be able to even begin to decode what's going on here. It's a very interesting premise. I absolutely love it.
But if you think about it, compare him to, say, Pete from Mad Men. Pete is intentionally condescending, and you hate him. Hannibal is literally eating people, and you still like him.
Okay, but let me interject something. It's a little bit fourth wall breaking to introduce this, but I think that this is why I have such a problem with what we call prestige TV, because we are being asked basically to take concepts which are usually really dark, very dark, and the assumption is you'll accept this because this is good quality television.
Yeah.
And it's wrapped often in really excellent storytelling, for sure. Good cinema, high budgets. I mean, production values are usually over the top with these shows, right? But the issue that I have is that the way that they are writing it is you'll take everything that we throw at you because this is quality television. And to some degree, I agree. I watched every single season of Breaking Bad, and it was epic from beginning to end.
Yes.
But Breaking Bad was also terrible. When I say terrible, I mean this is the epic sewer of human existence, while at the same time offering us and at the same time it offers us all of these like different juxtapositions of, well, you know, here's the reason that he did this, here's the reason that this happened here, and we as series watchers are supposed to decode it. And I felt very much the same way about Ozark, which was on Netflix, and I loved every season of Ozark. Don't get me wrong, I barely want to even talk about Ozark because I loved it so much, but I can't get past the idea that just them, the writers, saying to us, here's all these terrible people, here's all these bad concepts, here's one of the hallmarks of prestige TV now is, hey, is there incest in it? That's totally got to be prestige TV. And I'm not saying, I'm totally not saying that, like, okay, that can't have a place. I'm not doing the purity thing. I am saying that this doesn't always sit well with everyone. And yet, if you don't like it, then it's like, well, you're
Because
not
you don't get it.
sophisticated enough to get
Yes.
it. Yes.
You know,
And
I
I
thought
find that interesting.
I thought The Sopranos was kind of like that.
It is.
Yeah,
it
Very
is?
much is. Yeah.
I didn't hear what you said.
The
The
Sopranos.
Oh yeah. See, I couldn't get into Breaking Bad, but I liked
Oh
Ozark.
my god. Breaking Bad is so good. And it's
Oh.
so good at the end. Like, it's a great ending. And I
Oh,
loved it.
But then
From
there's a
it
beginning
used
movie.
to
end.
be it used to be that TV like this was a little bit of okay, well, here's a new series. We all love this. This is great, it's going to be fabulous. And it would cover some really difficult themes and some really difficult topics, but it was wrapped in story beats that were very specifically calculated, so that, and they were measured, I think, as well. So your shows still had a beginning, middle, and end. You had, your first act, your second act, you had your rise to action, you had your fall. It felt normalized. Okay, most prestige TV at this point, or most TV that we label prestige TV, does not have that. So the series, the episode itself within the series may have a beginning, middle, and end, right? Although often it ends murky. But each
Yeah.
episode is incredibly unconventional in its story beats. And it's almost as if, and I'm struggling to explain this because I'm a writer myself, but I'm struggling to explain why it is that so much of our TV now is built on these very atypical story beats that we don't seem to, that a lot of people don't even seem to understand or be able to appreciate. So like, you almost have to deconstruct an entire episode in order to get there. And I'm going to throw something out which may be very unpopular, I don't know, but I think that the reason that Disney Plus, with all of its shows, are so popular, including Mandalorian, even Book of Boba Fett, which I know not even everybody liked, but still, episodically, those shows carried a strong weight episode to episode, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And
Yeah.
yes, you could end on like a cliffhanger, and yes, there would be something for next week, but you never felt like you were in the middle of something and then the show ends and, oh, okay, well, I guess there won't be a resolution, or the resolution is just so weirdly tied to something that you didn't even feel like was important, that now you're struggling until maybe the second or next to last episode that's going to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
That's, to me, that's why this whole push toward elitism in TV is really, it bothers me. And again, not because I think that all of the television that is, kind of, that's good, is bad that way, but I think it turns viewers off, and then it creates divisions in what is, okay, well, if you like this kind of TV, you're this person. If you like this kind of TV, you're this person. Instead of being just, this is the entertainment that I enjoy, right? I know that we're going to get into this in a second, but Game of Thrones is one of my favorite prestige TV shows to talk about, because if you didn't know what was happening on Game of Thrones, if you didn't have water cooler info, which now in the days of working from home doesn't even apply anymore, but if you couldn't go into the office and talk about Game of Thrones, then who were you, right? You were
Right.
You almost wanted to watch Game of Thrones so that you would have something to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
And that, to me, that's actually, I mean, that can be good. That can be good. When it gets bad is when something happens in show and people say, okay, that's it. It was too dark. I can't watch this anymore. And then all of a sudden you are somehow not a real fan, or you're too sensitive, or, oh, what's the matter? Was this too woke for you, or, whatever. And those things just really, they don't help, but but they also, I think, the world of TV writing is an animal all by itself, right? It's not like writing for movies. And
Mm-mm.
if you are writing for television, there is a different kind of emphasis that people place on what's important. And when we are watching this kind of mass media, not everybody watches every movie that's out there, but for by and large, if it's a big show, somebody will see it, right? My concern right now is that writing for television is basically not outdoing excellence for excellence, but outdoing dark, gritty, whatever we can throw at the writer's room wall to make people want to watch, all under the umbrella of something called prestige TV. And it starts to desensitize the population, which I think is just the wrong way to go.
Like the
So,
escalation of weeds.
yeah, right.
It
Yeah.
escalated into oblivion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I really think that's a perfect way to say it. So, okay, so my next question to you guys is, having asked the question about has any TV shows ever sort of made you feel that way? My next question is, have you ever watched a series that actually made you want to not watch it because of something that happened? And Betty, I know you must have some.
So I do. It took me years to watch The Walking Dead because they killed the horse, the police horse. I stopped watching that new show, the superhero show. I can't remember what it's called.
The Boys.
I can't watch The Boys because they kill the dolphin in such a horrific
Uh-huh.
and it was already a pretty horrific show. So like
Yeah, I thought so too. I couldn't get into it.
It was like I like the story, but I can't get past the and I can't watch
the dolphin murder.
Yeah, and like I've heard about what happens in Game of Thrones. I can't watch it. Yeah,
I love Game of Thrones.
it's too late. It's too much.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, too much.
Okay, what about you, Tori?
Let's see. I don't know. I'm thinking.
How about when they killed Glenn? That was enough.
Yeah, you know, there's a few shows. The Walking Dead. Now, I was a super fan. Okay, I had a group with like 5,000 members. I co-hosted a podcast with them. It was a big deal, you know. I made it a big deal for like 5 years of my life. Never again will I get into a television show that much, you know. Like I can't be a super fan because it will just remind me of The Walking Dead.
But have you ever seen a series that actually that turned you off, either like mid-episode, or you watched an episode and you were like, nope, that's it, I'm not watching this series ever again?
That's not me. No. I always give everything a chance.
So every time Grey's Anatomy kills off a character I stop watching it.
Yeah, see, I keep going. I trek along with the story. Because I want to see the ending. So I just keep going.
I will not be watching The Boys.
Well, we'll have to we will figure out a way to include you in that conversation when we get to that episode because there are bigger questions about that series than just the plot. You can trust me on that one. I want to bring up one series that I watched, which is animated, actually. And it's a pretty epically done series called Invincible. Mm-hmm. And it's on Amazon Prime. It's very well done, but it is over the top graphic, over the top. And while the themes are incredibly important, it also suffers a little bit from that kind of odd writing hubris that makes me think that they were trying to be the animated form of prestige TV. And to a degree, I almost feel like they actually succeeded. A lot of our upcoming series right now are very much prestige TV. Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings,
Okay.
that is 100% prestige TV.
Yeah.
Um, Amazon's Wheel of Time is absolutely prestige TV. A bunch of series that come to FX, American Horror Story tries to be there. I don't think it succeeds.
It
American
succeeded the
Horror.
first
It
couple,
does. Yeah.
the first few, like it did, and
It
then
did.
he just yeah.
The show itself has good writing. I mean, Ryan Murphy is actually a really good
Once
writer.
upon a time,
Totally.
I think after like Hotel, it got real bad.
yeah. Like but
So-
even the Carnival season was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't that great.
Once
But-
it lost the actors, like the good ones, that
Yeah.
it went down.
Okay, but it still would be classified as prestige TV.
Yeah.
And the reason prestige TV does not have to be objectively good to the viewer in order to be prestige TV, right? Because the idea of this is not about the subjective rating necessarily by the viewer, but is very wound up in the subjective rating of the critics. So if Metacritic doesn't give your show a really good overall, like over 75%, your show is probably not prestige TV.
So not Gilligan's Island.
Yeah, probably no. And I would be very surprised if we had that term back when Gilligan's Island was on TV.
Yeah.
In fact, at that point, which we'll talk about in TV Now and Then, they didn't even actually have character development. There was no such thing as character development. The characters were written before the show, and then they really didn't learn or grow. They existed in one solid rut, and
That's
they stayed
true.
there. Yes. But by contrast, most shows, especially now, and absolutely the shows on Prestige TV, are all about a kind of iconic character growth that is ostensibly, I think, not even really possible. It's the kind of growth that exists only in fictional worlds where you can hasten growth with these horrific or very dark, traumatic events. And so if we think to Ozark, it is the reason that those characters grew the way that they grew is because they were basically avalanched with terribad choices and decisions. And then those cascaded into worse and worse choices.
But take a moment right now to bow for Laura Linney. Like, she's brilliant.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And also, I mean, like I said, I almost hate to even bring up Ozark because I absolutely love this series so much. I really found myself being excited about it every single time that I was able to watch even half an episode. Okay, so
think about Handmaid's Tale. Like, the amount of things that those people do in there, and I'm still going. Aunt Lydia can be saved, and
yeah, right.
Blonde, what's her name, can be saved. In real life, we would be like, hang them.
Yes, and this is another aspect of storytelling for us now, which will culminate with The Boys. That's why I wanted to do the episode on The Boys.
Right.
We are in a period of time where we clearly do not have a really good tangible understanding of what moral center is. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't say it condescendingly, and I don't say it like, well, of course, everybody has their own morality. I mean that societally, our writing in our entertainment is so all over the place. And then the stuff that we consider to be Hallmark entertainment is oftentimes centered around these really, really gray areas where we are exploring a kind of um, an understanding of our society that is not tethered in either good or bad. And that sometimes can make it really difficult for us to get a good handle on not only what are we supposed to be doing here in this series, but also what does that mean for us? If we are always rooting for Hannibal because he's the polite killer, because he's the nice guy, because he's the whatever, what does that say about us? What does that say about how we are looking at TV?
What
And if
about
we
Dexter? What about Dexter?
and Dexter too, yes, that's another perfect example. Now, if you're
Well,
if you talk,
Well, I think one of the reasons why I do so in Mad Men and Handmaid's Tale, Elizabeth Moss is the moral center of those shows.
that's true.
And honestly, one of the reasons why she's wasn't my favorite character when I first started watching Mad Men, it's Joan, and why she's not my favorite character in Handmaid's Tale, because if you're already the moral center, then where are you going to go up from?
Right.
And this has a lot to do with the way that prestige TV, in terms of when it is first sort of organized, why the characters need to be so rock bottom. Because anybody who is behaving even slightly aligned good stands out to the point where they almost cannot even get any kind of character arc because they already stand out with the backdrop of all of the slimy, terrible, horrible things that are happening. So they don't, there isn't the same opportunity for growth, where most of the opportunity for growth comes from the really terrible, just disgusting stuff that's happening. And that's an issue. The other thing that used to happen, which, we'll talk about on another podcast too, but the other thing that used to happen is there used to be consequences for wrong action. So you always knew that the villain in a story was going to get punished somehow thematically, and that you almost couldn't wait for that to happen, right? And now we have developed this system of there is moral ambiguity where the good guy, maybe he's just misunderstood, or maybe we just don't have the right focus, or maybe he was traumatized as a child, and therefore all of the things that he has done are now suddenly a lot more empathetic. We can be a bit more compassionate toward them. And again, I'm not saying that's not a bad position to be thinking about, but it is pervasive in especially our big drama series. And I think it creates, at least for me, it creates this odd feeling of, well, if I'm going to like the protagonist, then I have to accept all of the things that the protagonist does, even if I don't like them really. Because I can't fictionally get into the story of a protagonist who does things that are that far out if I can't also forgive them or feel like there's some kind of genuine connection. I'll tell you where this sort of kind of comes from for me. When I was watching Mad Men, there are things that Dawn does that I cannot forgive. I just cannot forgive. And there are plenty of things that Dawn does that make me go, hey, that was pretty cool. Or, wow, this guy is so super slick, right? But I can't always justify or reconcile my feelings about the bad things that he does with the, hey, this guy is super slick and this is super intelligent and I love where the story's going, because the main protagonist just makes me feel so gross. That's an issue. And that's part of what I keep seeing over and over and over again in a lot of these programs. I just got through watching the last season of The Mayans, right? And I love The Mayans. It's the sequel to Sons of Anarchy. And the people, undeniably, in The Mayans, which is a motorcycle gang, are terrible people. It doesn't matter whether you want to like them or not want to like them. They are terrible people. They do terrible things. Even the people who you think are the good guys do terrible things. And again, this is part of what Prestige TV seems to keep pushing over and over and over again, which is basically it's okay to be terrible. And I definitely have a tough time with this. Now, that doesn't mean that all Prestige TV has to be that way, right? And I think I specifically just said, like, The Mandalorian is definitely very, very, very good at not crossing certain boundaries, right? Mando is Mando. You know he's got a creed. Even if he hasn't stuck to it the entire time, he absolutely is one of the good guys, and you know he's one of the good guys. But most, if not all, of the current iterations of our TV series now don't have that. So, okay, so next question for both of you. And specifically, I want to hear from you, Tori.
Okay.
When you are watching a show where people have to make very difficult moral choices,
Yeah.
does it matter to you that those moral choices would not be the moral choices that you would make? In other words, like, can you watch a show where, let's say, the main protagonist went out on the town and drove his car because he was super drunk that night and hit someone and then didn't report it, and, you know, maybe spends the rest of the series being racked with guilt, but never reports it anyway? Like, those kinds of things. I don't mean
Right.
that needs to be the one, but something like that. What's your thought on that?
Okay, so you ask hard questions. You really do. Okay. Okay, let's put the question in a different way.
All right. Think about this. Think about a show that you really like where the character has done something that is unforgivable.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So the Game of Thrones, yeah, that one really kind of, I didn't agree with some things that happened, and in The Walking Dead too, there were people that died. I was like, what the fuck, you know? Like, I really like that guy, you know, and like, but that's just how Prestige TV is.
The guy who got trapped in the door.
Yes, the
That's
guy
messed up.
that got trapped in the door, that poor man, you know? And like, you get to like empathize with these victims, you know, before they die. It's sad. And, you know, I think any kind of show that any kind of like animal dies is very sad. Like, I can't think of one right now, but like Turner and Hooch. Do you remember that show back in the day?
Really? Was that a series? Oh my god.
Yeah, Turner.
It was a TV series?
I
I
think I
thought
missed that.
so.
It's a movie.
Or is it a movie?
It turned into a movie? So there is a movie, but was it turned into a TV show?
I don't know. I thought so. I thought I saw it in multiple episodes, but I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe it
Okay.
was the movie stretched out.
Betty, tell me for you, if let me rephrase the question completely then. Is there an unforgivable sin that you absolutely will say, nope, that's it for the series because the protagonist committed this heinous crime or heinous sin of whatever?
I guess if there was like animal cruelty, that seems to be my line.
Okay.
I think that there have been episodes where, like, in TV where I've watched, where like, taking it back to Xena, Gabrielle has her first kill, and like, I was devastated for months about what happened to Gabrielle. But she also made it sympathetic because then the whole story arc was the guilt she felt or whatever. But then
Right.
Lorelai and Rory will do something mean to each other, and it's like it will be difficult for me to get through whatever it is they've done, but I generally get through it. That makes sense.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So
I truck along.
so I grew up reading science fiction novels and short stories. Ray Bradbury was specifically one of my absolute favorites. I would literally go through the library section and look for short stories in these huge anthology books so that I could find a Ray Bradbury short story. It was a running thing with me. And what I didn't realize at the time was that science fiction really tackles the very difficult question about what is humanity? What is humanity in sort of the mirror with technology and science as the backdrop? So, a lot of times science fiction will tackle things that now I think we sort of relegate over to fantasy fiction. And I mean, fantasy is a subgenre of science fiction, so it kind of, I can see where the offshoots sort of work genre wise. But thematically, we are seeing a lot more science fiction as prestige television picking up the slack for the idea that I think prestige TV first started out to try to accomplish, which is the question about what is it that it takes to be human, and what is it that our morality plays into with that. So is it that our morality makes us good people, or is it that our morality just prevents us basically from being the bad people that we actually are inside? Like, those kinds of questions are the questions that I think are good questions.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I feel like we do explore. But what has happened, except for these shows that I'm about to mention, but instead what we are concentrating on are, how bad can we be before we cease being empathetic and compassionate? And that's a really different question to ask than, is my morality the base of who I am, or is there something else about it that fuels that kernel of my good or bad side? It's kind of like, the characters in most prestige TV shows are basically born to be bad, period. And then things happen to them that give them little rays of light, and we latch on to that because, oh, look, see, no, they're actually good. Look, he's good. He's taking his kid fishing. Oh, look, there's this little thing to empathize with or be compassionate about, because
Right.
haven't we all just done that? And that's
But if you were
different.
watching everyone be good characters and you didn't have that, it's like having a straight man, then you would just be watching people taking their kids fishing and
Oh, you're right. You're
meals.
absolutely right. But think about the core of writing, right? Think about the core of, as an example, what's a good example? What's a good series from, okay, let's think about Star Trek for a second. If you think about Star Trek in any episodic version, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, TNG, the newest one, whatever you want, right? The fundamental question is always, it always comes from, what is best for humanity, or what is humanity, and is it worth preserving, is it worth keeping? How can we be better? Not how can we be bad and be good at the same time. I mean, there are some episodes like that, but think about how they treat it. They don't even treat it like, oh yeah, you know, there's a dichotomy, there's this yin and yang in between us all. It is without the integration, we don't live. We don't exist as good people. Those questions, I think, are the good questions. The bad questions are the questions like the boys. What if we just all start out as evil, terrible people and we try to redeem ourselves? Where does the redemption come from? How much do we have to do to redeem ourselves from what? That's where Breaking Bad comes in. That's where Handmaid's Tale comes in.
But at the same time, it's like Miley Jenner or Kylie Jenner being a billionaire 24-year-old and flying her own jet like 20 minutes away or 4 minutes away. Everyone seems shocked by these things happening, but it's not really like superheroes having ultimate power and they have no one to stop them. I mean, it's not really a surprise that they would be bad. It's only kind of a surprise that they took so long to do that story.
Okay, but step outside of that for a second and don't think about this on such a granular level, right? It's not the metadata here that's important. It's the overall characterization of humanity in its rawest form. And that's why I said to some degree you kind of have to break the fourth wall and step into the writer's room to think about prestige television or television that we now consider to be like, you know, hey, very high production values, awesome Metacritic, gets Emmy nominations, does things. Think about the core of those stories. Some stories do it well. I'll go back to one of my all-time favorites, Black Sails. Black Sails does a kind of service to prestige TV that very few other TV shows have. And Flint as a character is flawed in so many ways, but we uncover the purpose behind those flaws. We don't get Flint as he's a monster and how far does he have to go for redemption. It's he was a good person and he had his life together and some external force drove him into this. That's different. Same thing with Spartacus. Spartacus is one of my favorites. Yeah. Well, Xena to a degree, but not quite.
The only reason she became a warrior was because she had her village was attacked, and so she had to learn how to fight back, and then she became evil.
Right, but I think that the different. Well, okay, so tone matters, I think too, but I'll get to that in 1 second. Okay. Spartacus to me, because of the way that they told the Spartacus story, he starts out as the most sympathetic of characters that you could possibly be. He's basically abducted, brought into this world where he doesn't even know. They give him a different name, they change his look, everything, right? And then they give him a sword and say, okay, fight or die. All right, so we've got that. Along the way, the redemptive value of Spartacus is I want to get back to being the good person that I was. Not I was born to be bad and therefore I will continue to burn down the world until everybody else feels as bad as I do. Which is oddly the way that Breaking Bad makes it feel like, despite the fact that Walter got into this whole thing for the medical bill reason, right? The whole point of Walter being in the drug trade was because he didn't have enough money for medical bills. That, of course, is sympathetic and empathetic. But as time goes by, clearly that's not an issue anymore. And so the redemptive arc turns into something completely different. He passes that point and there is now it's not. The same thing to a smaller degree in The Sopranos, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that I think that these things matter is not because we shouldn't be watching these shows or because I think that we need to be Pollyanna in our everyday life or in our entertainment or nothing like that. As I said before and at the outset of the show, I love every single one of these shows. But my concern is that as we keep moving forward, we are forcing plots and story beats and character arcs into darker and darker corners where pretty soon prestige TV is basically being a horrible person and experiencing a moment of redemption, which then turns you into the all loved protagonist. And that's weird to me. That seems like an odd way to kind of wind your thread. Now, I also finished watching Foundation on Apple TV because I got Apple TV to watch See. And Foundation was a sleeper. It was really good. But the science fiction of it is difficult, I think. It is always going to be difficult because there are so many complicated themes in here. Same thing with Dune. And in fact, while we're on the subject of Dune, although Dune is not a series, but while we're on that topic though, Dune is another one where they make the protagonist out to be, yeah, you're gonna love him, and he's not lovable.
Yeah.
He's terrible. I don't want to spoil anything because we haven't gotten to the place where people who haven't seen what the next installment of Dune is going to be. I want that to actually be surprising because I feel like it's that impactful. But if you know the story Dune, you know that it's not good. It's not good. That again, that's my ultimate concern is that we are not making series like Firefly. We're not making series like
Firefly is such a great.
They get canceled early.
Yeah, well, and see, that's the problem, right? Because again, I hate this, but the public, I mean, at large, is as a consumer of entertainment, voraciously consumes dark matter. It is absolutely it's a known trope in writing that if you are going to make an impactful series, it has to be dark, at least at some point, in order to make it feel like it's got importance. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't succeed without it. And again, I go back to Star Trek because this season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds was episodically perfect. I mean,
Yes.
it was right? It was just amazing.
It is very great.
And I went into it thinking I'm not even going to like Anson Mount as Captain Pike. I mean,
I love him as Captain Pike.
Well, I was thinking to myself, what could he possibly bring to this role that is going to be good? And I'll tell you, in the first episode, I was totally won over.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just absolutely fabulous.
He's a silver fox. He's definitely a good-looking man.
I think the idea with Star Trek is, listen, there's a lot of dark themes to explore, but we can explore them through the lens of humanity and not through the lens of, well, how far down into the sewer have you gone?
Right.
Why do you? Because that seems to be the current thinking. Well, do you think you're actually better than me? You know, and that I hate that question in fiction because that isn't the question I want my fictive protagonist to ask me. I want my fictive protagonist to ask me, how do you handle the situation? Here's how my fictional protagonist handled it. Now, give me food for thought, not give me the endless darkness to have to crawl out of. So I know we're kind of running late on time here, but I want to ask both of you guys, Tori, specifically for you, what prestige TV show do you think really rises to all of the accolades that it gets or all of the attention that it gets? What do you think is worth watching?
I will say Game of Thrones. I will say that. The Walking Dead. I would say that one too. let's see. I I really liked Handmaid's Tale, but I haven't seen all of it yet, so I don't want to. You know, Star Trek is great. I love Star Trek. I've watched them all. Discovery's a little, I don't know, a little off, a little out there, but came back. And then um, anything from Disney, especially Mandalorian.
WandaVision.
Yeah, yeah. If I could recommend any prestige TV show, I would say The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I and you know, I go back to why I think Mandalorian is so successful because it is definitely it's formulaic in its execution, and that is not always a bad thing. I feel like we are trying to be so crafty and so sneaky with our story beats that we have forgotten the reason that it feels good to watch a show with a beginning and a middle and an end with these rises in actions and then falls so that we can experience things and actually acclimate to what's going on. There's a reason that those work so well. And when we get too crafty about it and when we create these like levels of tension that are so high that there is no resolution and that they can't be a resolution, we doom the show. We doom it to this outer expression of, you know, I'm just watching this because I'm masochistic about being a fan. And like that's weird. I find that so weird. I feel like that with The Boys, right? I watch it and I absolutely consume it again. I mean, I we ravenously watch it, right? But why are we watching it? Because it feels like the bad is somehow we're going to figure it out. It's going to get better. Like Betty was saying about Handmaid's Tale. There's going to be redemption. Something's going to happen and somebody's going to get redeemed.
But that show's still good.
And it just never happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, same question to you, Betty.
So I'm gonna say Handmaid's Tale and Mad Men. And I want to say like one of the best parts about strangest parts about Mad Men is we know that the show is technically about Dawn, but I feel like the show is actually centered around all of the women and all of their different arcs about how they change or do not change and what happens to them, which and at the same time, all the men are basically doing the same stuff. They're all pigs. And the only one throughout that entire series that does not actually have a consequence is Dawn.
Right.
So like good or bad consequence. So you have Betty not changing and going to her death. Then you have Joan getting what she thinks she wants and then having to change direction and then benefiting. And then you have Peggy, obviously, who starts at the beginning and you see her rise to the top because that's where she was going. So, and then Don having a crisis, everything always works out for him.
Well,
Mhm.
I mean, I have too many to even throw around. There's a lot. I mentioned some of them. And some of the, I think, I mean, if I were to pick, I think maybe my favorites. I don't know. I feel like Severance comes close. And Severance is a little bit newer. But it skirts the line that I desperately want, which is very
I love that one.
complex.
I love that one guy. The guy.
The one from Party Down?
Yeah, the left, the
Parks and
far
Rec?
left. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I like the fact that the characters are not just complicated, but also have like it feels like there's a reason for them to be there other than just to suffer, right?
Right.
I never feel like, I always feel like these characters must have
Thank you.
really
Yeah.
interesting downtime lives, if you will. Like, you know, there's your favorite characters exist in your TV shows, and then, well, what do they do when the cameras aren't on? Like that kind of thing. I always think, wow, they must actually live very rich lives.
The Haunting series, would those be considered prestige?
No, because first of all, because they're not actually series necessarily, they are shorts. They're mini series, right? But by mini series, they are basically like one long movie broken up into some smaller parts, because that's the only way you can tell that story. So it's not like they don't have arcs.
Like Flowers in the Attic.
Well, right, but also a series has the potential for season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, season 5, whatever. Watchmen wouldn't count, because Watchmen, when it was aired, was specifically just a one-off episodic piece. But then you have a series like Lovecraft Country, which, to me, Lovecraft Country, even though it only got one season, which is so depressing to me, was, I personally, from a prestige TV standpoint, did, I think, one of the best jobs of giving us everything from
Was that girl on the right on Full House?
I
Not
don't
the
know.
little girl from Full House?
I don't know, actually. But the idea at this point now, the idea of some of these shows being more than what they are, it becomes problematic. And like you said, we are at the mercy right now. The people who consume entertainment, the audiences, are at the mercy of corporate executives and production companies that are making choices based on both ratings and viability, because that has to do with money, right? So if a show costs $1 billion to make, if it isn't making a return on the investment, meaning it doesn't have some kind of critical acclaim, or it's not pulling in massive audiences, it's not going to get renewed.
Right.
And I mean, I think we can kind of look to the episodic series of Stranger Things to see also that critical acclaim matters, but audience appeal matters even more.
Mhm.
So Netflix would have a riot on its hands if it just said tomorrow, okay, sorry, no more Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Because audiences would, we haven't even figured out what actually is really happening. That's a big deal.
Oh,
right?
I thought this was the last season.
The one that's coming up is the one that just aired is the penultimate season.
Oh,
Next season is supposed to cinch everything up, and we'll see what happens. But there's a good example. Stranger Things is a great example of how prestige TV can work, right? Because it doesn't start from the premise that the world is a terrible place. It starts from the premise of the world is a fantastic place where friendship and relationships matter. And so we're not looking for, the kids don't have to find redemption. They have to find meaning. They have to find the true truths. That was redundant, but they have to find the excellence in their own lives in order to realize what the world has to offer them. That's a totally different idea than, let's say, Game of Thrones, where the world is a terrible place and it's out to kill you. Winter is coming basically means your death is nigh. And that's a different idea altogether. And so when my closing thought on prestige TV is, we are paying way too much attention to and when I say we're paying way too much attention, I don't mean that we shouldn't like these shows. I'm saying somehow we all need to understand that the shows that we enjoy are problematic. They're problematic because they encourage us to think about the world from a darker place than I think we really should be thinking about it from. Because even though there's dark things in the world, we don't have to be dark. And most of our main protagonists in almost all of these prestige shows are so dark, have such tortured pasts, have done unforgivable things. And we are supposed to say, well, that's like us. As the protagonist, we can understand that. We can reconcile that. And I honestly, sometimes I think that that's the wrong message to send. But
At the same time, it's a safe place to learn empathy, and if you're not seeing bad things happen to people, then and you live like a rosy perfect life, then you're never going to realize that bad things happen to people.
correct. And I am in no way, shape, or form advocating that we should return to a 1950s or 60s style of Pollyannaism, where
That was a
everything
good movie.
is perfect, right? And the world has no problems. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if we continue to see Negan as simply somebody that was just misunderstood, then it's really not that difficult for me to understand why people look at, sorry to be political, but it's not hard for me to understand why people look at someone like Donald Trump and go, well, he was just misunderstood.
Right.
Because this is what we're advocating. We are advocating that even the worst among us is not just redeemable, but
Yeah.
deserves chance after chance after chance after chance. And that I don't think is actually the message.
But
that we
meanwhile,
wanna send.
Leah Michelle is being burned at the stake, and they don't want to give her a second chance, whether she was misunderstood or not.
Yeah, right. And that's why I'm saying, like, there's a lot of complex issues that we can tackle inside of the prestige TV sort of umbrella, and we can get to those because there are dark themes to explore. And I'm again, I think the dark themes are important, but the way that we are approaching the dark themes, where if the world is just dark, period, and has no redeeming value except for little pieces that the protagonists are able to put together, and that's why we're supposed to think that they're so heroic, that doesn't rise to the occasion of being heroic. Being heroic is something completely different. And even just being a good protagonist is not about overcoming the darkness that you created in the first place. It's about something completely different than that. So anyway, I don't want to get too far into that part because I actually have a podcast about that later, which I think will be super exciting as well. Okay, so I am going to, just because we are again running super late on time, I'm going to ask you guys one last question. What TV show or what idea for a TV show would you guys like to see that is specifically along these guidelines, the Prestige TV guidelines? What would you want to see under that umbrella? If you could write any script at all, what would it be? Go ahead, Tori.
I would go with a Pretty Woman type thing. Maybe not so pretty. Like she's not.
So she's an ugly hooker.
Yeah, no. She's pretty. She can be an attractive woman, but she's dirtier than Julia Roberts seemed to be. Like it'll be
Less
great.
An
advantaged?
actual hooker.
Are you talking about less advantaged? Are you talking about?
Yes, I'm talking about like she's like coming back. Like her life is hard. It's
more
really
downtrodden.
hard. Yes, and she's
So
doing
like more
this-
realistic.
Yes, to survive and to support her habit. You know, like that's what it's about. So, like, it would be interesting to have a series about that kind of lifestyle.
Okay. What about you, Betty?
There would definitely be time travel, and there would be a lot of sets from like the 60s.
So what would your story be about? Pitch us your best prestige TV. What are we going to see coming soon from Betty?
So I don't know. They have a way of going back into the past and the future, like a book or something. Maybe it's a book that gets them there.
So not to make this self-advertising, but I actually wrote a story about this group of people that they call themselves the Mythology Club, and they find a book, and the book itself is unlocked basically by their DNA. It's complicated. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in it, but it's that kind of story. They actually travel back in time on numerous occasions through the book, which acts as a kind of portal. Good choice. Very good choice. I love those kinds of stories. They have endlessly fascinated me. I also just got through writing this short story, which is about a lake of portals. You go.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's you know what? It was one of the best twisty turny pieces that I think I've ever written. I really liked it. None of which I would say would make good TV though, because both of those stories are incredibly difficult, I think, to conceptualize inside of a visual narrative. So I'm going to go with an idea of experiencing life in a totally different mindset. So basically making a person experience life through all different life forms on the planet. So if you could think about, like, what would it be like to experience life as a plant? What would it be like to experience life as a tree, a dog, something on the Serengeti, whatever? And each one of those experiences would add to the core knowledge that you have. I feel like those kinds of explorations are some of my favorites. Again,
I actually
very different.
wrote something similar to that, but only people.
Oh, nice.
Yours is better because then I could figure out what it's like being my cat.
You know, I feel like the idea of us experiencing life from multiple vantage points is also one of the reasons that we love the idea of reincarnation. We like that idea because it gives us the ability to think about what would it be like to be any other life form, and that sometimes is pretty cool.
Well, that, and they say that people watch more television of like the shows that they repeat. It's because they're watching something that they don't have in that show.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So I this week actually don't have anything super magnificent for food. Amazingly, none of my movie blog ideas really come from Prestige TV. And partly, I think, because I don't often think about it that way. And a lot of my stuff comes from movies too. But I will say that I think if you are going to have a meal while you're watching any kind of prestige TV, that it should definitely be something that you can serve with cocktail napkins and possibly a martini. We'll do the Don Draper. Yes.
I was going to say caviar.
Yeah, caviar. There we go.
Prestige. Only prestige people eat caviar.
Yeah, prestige. How about mini cocktail weenies? Now that's prestige.
Yes, mini cocktail weenies, and I have to give the plug to the martini again because I think you sometimes need alcohol to get through some of these series.
With the olive. With the olive.
Yes, with the olive. Which at some point we will definitely have our show have you experience life through the growth of an olive. So you'll get that perspective too. At the end of your lifespan, you'll actually get plucked into a martini. That would be, No, I'm just kidding, but that sounds hilarious. Okay. So this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much to Betty and Tori for being my co-hosts. I really appreciate it. Next week, we are going to talk about, are we talking about TV Now and Then? I think we're talking about TV Now and Then. One quick thing before we go. I do actually want to just very briefly touch on something that we watched this week, which I thought was super interesting. We had our Netflix and our Hulu and everything out. We for whatever reason we're so overloaded with choices that like we find it hard to make a choice, and we went on
Yeah.
Roku. Yeah, it's true, right? We went
Mhm.
on Roku, and we found a channel called Film Rise. It was, it started out with British TV, but then they had all these other subgenres, and we started aggregating a list of movies to watch. And I realized that for all the movies that I have seen, for all of the TV shows that I have seen, there are hundreds more that I have not seen. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think like we forget that, yeah, we've seen like the most popular of things, but wow, there is a world of content out there that is totally worth exploring. And so we watched a bunch of British dramas that are totally give you a brand new perspective on how you think about story beats and how you think about uh, shows just in their actual presentation. It's just very interesting. So I highly recommend that. Highly recommend it. We will see you next week, and thank you again for participating.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Ciao, Biz.